Today we're out here in southern Washington taking a look at the 2020 Lexus RCF Track Edition. This is, as you'd expect, the track-focused version of Lexus's RCF Performance Coupe. If you didn't know by now, Lexus and their parent company Toyota have a long history of making vehicles that are track-focused and motorsports-focused as well. But Lexus is going about a track-focused vehicle like this a little bit differently than something along the lines of a BMW M4, because Lexus is after precision, not necessarily acceleration. As you'd expect out of a track edition vehicle, we have a lot of carbon fiber going on in the RCF. So we have a carbon fiber hood to help reduce weight. We also have a carbon fiber lip spoiler down there at the bottom. We find the same basic headlamp setup that we find in the regular RCF with these 3 LED modules, LED turn signals, and then this Nike swoosh right there inboard. And then of course the Lexus squiggle grille, which is what we find on all the F models. The RCF Track Edition obviously competes with something like the BMW M4 and of course the Mercedes C-Class Coupe in the AMG lineup, but this is not exactly a Lexus IS Coupe and it's not exactly a Lexus GS Coupe. It's a combination of those two vehicles. So the overall dimensions end up being slightly different than some of the direct competitors. In addition to the carbon fiber up front, we also get a carbon fiber roof in the RCF Track Edition, the carbon fiber spoiler we see there in the back, we have this matte gray paint going on here, and then we see some suspension changes as well. But interestingly enough, the suspension and drivetrain changes are a little bit unusual. Instead of the trick electric torque vectoring differential that we find in the regular RCF, this goes back to a mechanical torsion rear differential. Lexus says that they did that for the purity of the driving experience, and the engineers preferred the way that this differential behaves versus the limited slip that's electronically controlled. Now, that obviously begs the question, then why don't they all have this particular differential in the rear? And we don't have an answer to that one just yet. Up front and in the back, we find the same springs that we find in the regular RCF, but the dampers are different in this model, and then we find different anti-roll bars as well. Lexus says that the mission for the RCF Track Edition was to make a trackable car that was also street drivable. So this is theoretically the kind of car you could commute in daily and then take to the track on the weekends. No track car would be complete without a large wing on the back, and so we have one right here. Lexus tells us that this can generate up to about 60 pounds of extra downward force that could be helpful out on a track. We get the same turn signals and tail lamps that we find in the regular RCF model here, with a corresponding swoosh right there in the headlamp, and then the stacked exhaust that was seen in the RCF for a while. Then we get a little bit more carbon fiber down there right at the bottom. But other than that, this looks very much like the rest of the RC lineup. For a variety of different reasons, Lexus has been a little bit reluctant to adopt turbocharged engines, especially in their performance vehicles. So we find a naturally aspirated V8 engine under this hood, the only one left really in this segment. This particular engine is a 5-liter V8. It receives a very modest power bump for 2020, up to 472 horsepower and 395 pound-feet of torque. You'll notice that especially the torque figure is considerably below many of the performance alternatives from the Germans. However, the way that this engine delivers its power is quite different than the average turbocharged engine, and that's the reason that Lexus has been so dedicated to this particular engine design. Naturally aspirated engines tend to have a very linear and predictable torque build and horsepower build as engine RPMs rise. And that's not what we see in turbocharged engines. In turbocharged engines, right off the line, you get very little torque, very little horsepower down there. But as the turbo starts to spool up, the torque really starts to ramp up very, very quickly. Whereas in this engine, we definitely have to rev it an awful lot higher to get the 395 pound-feet of torque out of it, but that makes it easier for this vehicle to be steered by the throttle out on a track, if that's something that you're interested in. Power sent to the rear wheels only via an 8-speed automatic transmission, but we get a slightly more aggressive final drive ratio for the track edition of the RCF. That drops overall 0 to 60 times from 4.2 seconds according to the manufacturer down to 4 seconds for this model. It's worth noting that essentially the same 5-liter V8 will be found under the hood of Lexus's other coupe, the LC 500. The driver and front passenger get seats that look like they're 5-point harness capable, but we're told that these are not structurally designed for a 5-point harness. I think that's a little bit odd actually for a track-focused vehicle like this. I had expected a seat that really was designed for that 5-point harness. The headrest is fixed into place and has the F logo embossed on it, and the leather upholstery is very, very red in this vehicle, and you can see it's sort of a two-tone affair, so the leather and this Alcantara-like insert right there in the middle, they're not quite the same red. They're designed to have this definite pattern to them. Although we do find perforations in this insert, these seats are neither heated nor ventilated in this model. As you'd expect out of a sport-focused trim, we have pretty aggressive bolstering on the seat backs and a lot more of that red fabric and red leather going on the front doors, but the overall design is very similar to the rest of the RC lineup. The red and black theme continues down the dashboard. We find the same infotainment screen that we find in the rest of the Lexus RC lineup. 2 large air vents right there, the combination of physical and touch buttons for the climate control system. We have touch sliders for the temperature over here, and then buttons for the rest. Single slot optical disc player there. We have a pretty typical console shifter right here. Drive is all the way down there. It is a gated shifter, manual mode over to the left right there like that. And then we have paddles on the back of the steering wheel. There's a drive mode button right over here on this side. This allows you to choose between Eco, Normal, Sport, and then we also have a Sport Plus mode. Over here on this side, we find the controls for the infotainment system. It is still the Lexus touchpad controller, which is probably my least favorite input method over there. And then we have 2 decently sized cup holders to the right. The center console is softly padded and it opens to reveal a generously sized storage compartment for a rear-wheel drive vehicle like this. We have 2 USB inputs, 1 auxiliary input, and a 12-volt power port in there. The instrument cluster is a partial LCD unit like we find in the regular RCF. We have a large digital tachometer right there in the middle with a digital speed readout, and then an analog speedometer over there on the right. There's also a color multifunction display to the left. The steering wheel is also the same as the regular RCF. We have paddle shifters on the back. It's a 3-spoke design. We find the cruise control controls on a stalk down there that moves with the steering wheel, and then the buttons for the radar adaptive function right up here. This button module controls that multifunction LCD, and then we get some infotainment buttons over there on the left. Lexus clearly achieved their mission of creating a daily driver, livable, track-focused vehicle. Even though the RCF is definitely more hardcore than the regular RCF, the changes are fairly subtle, so you really would have to drive the 2 vehicles back-to-back in order to really be able to tell the difference. We haven't been able to do any 0 to 60 testing out here in Washington, but I have no reason to doubt Lexus's claimed numbers of this being about 0.2 of a second faster 0 to 60 than the regular RCF. Again, we get a more aggressive rear axle ratio in this, and that's how we get 0 to 60 faster than the RCF, even though the engine produces the same amount of power. Now, that extra acceleration should come a little bit at the expense of overall fuel economy, but this isn't really a fuel economy focused vehicle, so I don't think that's too big of a problem. Overall braking scores are likely going to be the same as the regular RCF because we find the same tires on this model as we find in that one as well. Lexus tells us that they liked the way that these tires behaved and the way they performed in the vehicle already, so they saw no reason to change them for the track model. In terms of overall handling, this clearly gets an A+. Not only does the RCF handle well, but it also has a really great feel to it. And that's something that I've commented on every time we've driven a rear-wheel drive Lexus, whether it's an IS, a GS, an LS, or this RC right here. Lexus really spends an awful lot of time on overall driving dynamics, and they have a very responsive steering rack. It has a very direct and linear feel to it, and just the overall way that the vehicle drives out on the road, the way that it handles adverse situations is very, very confidence-inspiring. And it's a little bit different than what we see in some of the German options out there, because in comparison, something like a C63 or a BMW M4, they can feel definitely heavier out on a track. I've had the ability to drive the current generation RCF and a number of its key German competitors out on a track together, and the RCF definitely has a more nimble feeling overall. However, there's a catch. We just don't have the same kind of thrust out of this engine that we find in the competition. Sure, this engine sounds great, and it has a lovely V8 sound to it, but that doesn't mean it's going to get you from 0 to 60 as fast as the turbocharged competition. The result is that comparative lap times will really depend on the kind of track and, of course, the driver. If you're out on a track with a lot of long straightaways, then this is going to be slower than some of those German options. As far as the ride goes, Lexus definitely achieved their mission of creating a very daily driver livable vehicle, but I have to say that the Lexus LC does feel a little bit more refined in terms of its overall driving nature out on the road. It's also worth noting that the Lexus LC is not really going to be that much slower than this model, and it's not really going to handle that much worse than this either. The LC will also give you a slightly more polished ride, a slightly quieter cabin, a more modern cabin feel, and it's not going to give up much of the precision that we find in the RC. Fuel economy is a little bit difficult to talk about in a performance vehicle like this, but this engine was designed with fuel economy in mind. This V8 engine has the ability to run on the Atkinson cycle in order to save fuel economy that's the same combustion cycle that they use in the Toyota Prius. But obviously you won't find Toyota Prius-like fuel economy in something with a 5-liter V8 like this. But if you treat the RCF gently, you may be able to get mid-20s in terms of overall fuel economy. Hold on to your hats, folks. It's now time to talk about how much the RCF Track Edition will set you back. A regular RCF will set you back $64,750. It is notably less expensive than the top-end Lexus LC 500. But this Track Edition is more expensive than an LC 500 at $96,650. And honestly, for me, that's a little bit of a tricky price tag because I think for $96,000, I would get the LC500. The LC500 has a better interior. I also think it's more attractive on the outside. Now, it's not going to be track focused like the RCF Track Edition, of course, because this does have the carbon fiber roof, the carbon fiber spoiler in the back, the carbon fiber hood up front, all the various tweaks and changes that we see in this model versus the regular version of the RCF. None of those will be found on the LC500. So if you do plan on taking your Lexus out on the track on weekends, that's exactly what this model is for. However, on the other hand, if you're just looking for a sporty Lexus, then the LC500 is going to be more comfortable, it's going to be more modern on the inside, and again, more attractive on the outside. And you're not really going to give up that much in terms of overall handling ability. Now, the precision factor in the LC is not going to be there the same way it is in the RCF Track Edition, but it's actually going to be a little bit less expensive. It's also worth noting that some of the competition is also going to be less expensive than the RCF Track Edition, and many of them are going to be faster 0 to 60. The key thing about the RCF Track Edition, again, is the precision and that feeling out on the track, something that Lexus and again Toyota have done very, very well for years and years and years. The steering precision that we find in this model, the way that this feels out on the track is absolutely excellent. I haven't had the chance to take this particular trim out on a track, but I have been out on the track multiple times in the regular RCF, and the regular RCF already has a more precise feel than something like the M4, something like the C63 AMG, and this takes things to the next level. Part of that is the way the suspension has been tuned, part of that is the way that they've programmed the software, and of course the rear limited slip differential, but a lot of it also has to do with the engine under the hood, because this engine again has a very linear power delivery. So if your foot's on the throttle and you're building RPMs, it's a very linear relationship with the power. You don't get that sort of surge of power that you can get in a turbocharged engine, which can throw you off a little bit out on a track. But again, I'm not quite sure how many people are really going to be taking a vehicle like this that's $96,000 out on a regular track experience. Be sure and let me know about that down there in the comment section below. If you're looking at a vehicle like this or something like an M4 or a C63, are you really going to be taking your vehicle out on a track that regularly? If you are, then this is going to be the better option versus some of those competitors. But if you aren't, and you're really focused mainly on daily driving, having an awful lot of fun on your favorite winding mountain road, etc., daily livable experiences, I would take the Lexus LC or some of the competition over the RCF Track Edition. Be sure and let me know what you think about that as well down there in the comment section below. I want to give a quick shout out to the Automotive Video Association. Alex on Autos, along with Redline Reviews, TFL Car, TFL Truck, Engineering Explained, and Matt Moran Motoring were all founding members of this association. And without this particular group, we wouldn't be able to have access to the cars we've had access to this weekend up here in Washington, and we wouldn't be able to get cars like this back to back or together for combined videos. So be sure to check out those other channels and see their takes on the same vehicles that we've been able to drive this weekend.